Hey everyone, James from TDB here, bringing you another Inbetweenisode. Today I am going to be talking about 3 common mistakes that I see people making all the time with Pu'erh. There are in many ways completely understandable mistakes, but nonetheless they are mistakes, and I want to do my part to help to improve people's approaches to this. So we're going to get right into it. First one, break up your cakes when you brew it. The goal is to brew something well and evenly and have a good cup. I think one big reason people have a hard time with Shaguan and some of these factory teas, Monghai Tea Factory to a lesser extent, is because they're not breaking up the tea properly. You absolutely do not want to brew one big chunk. You can sort of get away with this with some boutiques, even though I think you should definitely be breaking them up for boutiques too. But for factory teas, it's absolutely a bad idea because you're going to extract incredibly unevenly, and you want to be able to, those leaves to come apart. Your goal is not to have as pristine of wet leaf by the end of the session as you possibly can. You want to, your goal is to brew basically a good cup, unless you have a very different idea of what you're after as far as the tea world than me. So use your hands, use your pick. Use your pick. You kind of wedge this into the tea cake, and you pick it apart. You should be talking about very small chunks. Definitely, you definitely don't want even like 2 or 3 chunks. You want to have like 10 pieces, even if it's like 5 grams. You should be talking about very, very small chunks. And this is just going to allow you to extract far more evenly. It's make it far easier to brew, rather than something where you're like, oh man, it's just staying as one big chunk for like 6 or 7 infusions. I've been there before. I started out brewing kind of that way, where you get a little nervous with the tea pick. But yeah, use your hands. Use whatever it takes. Again, the goal is to brew a good cup of tea, and you absolutely don't want to be brewing one big chunk of Shaguan iron cake that's 10 grams. That's a completely awful way to go about it, unless you're doing some sort of quasi-grandpa-style brew. And even then, I think you should break it up. Second is to reheat the water. And I think this is something that we've been guilty of in the past, not heating up the water as often. And I think it's something I've slowly become better at over time. In fact, I think you can find a Marshall and calling us out on it in one of the first few years of the show. And initially I was like, we heat it up plenty. But I have kind of come around and be like, no, you should heat it up. There have been some people that say, yeah, you remove the oxygen or something like that. I've never really felt much of a difference, and I think the water temperature is far more important when it comes to that. So I'm someone that does strongly believe that you should be using boiling water for all Pu'erh. I think if your Pu'erh needs it to not be too nasty, I think it's probably not very good Pu'erh. So something is probably wrong with that, even if it is young. I guess you could have the case where young Pu'erh, you want to brew it slightly younger, slightly lower. I wouldn't do that if I were you, but I do understand that one a little bit more. If you're talking about aged tea or something with even a little bit of age, you should definitely be using boiling water 100%. The third piece of advice is to don't over-acquire. So this one's not about brewing like the other two. So especially if you are just starting out, it's good to just stay lean and mean as far as your tea stash goes until you kind of have your bearings. Don't over-acquire. A lot of people have this sort of like dream casting vision of the Pu'erh collection that they want to go to, and they want to retire in the log cabin with all this Pu'erh that they're going to drink until they're 95 years old, and then they're going to die or whatever. Spend a lot on samples. Samples represent different experiences. They're good. You don't run into the risk of, the shopping addiction aspect is not quite as bad, of hoarding, whatnot. There is a case where you do want to eventually be hitting hard, but what you need to know before that is you need to have the proper experience and kind of knowledge to know what you like. Different people are going to like different things. It makes sense that not everyone is going to buy the same tongs of things. Take your time in terms of learning. And then once you do have a good knowledge base after a few years, that's when you really can start to buy teas in bigger quantity. But I do think it's really tempting to buy a cake of this, a cake of that, which is sort of what I did in the beginning. And you know what ended up happening? A lot of those cakes ended up getting wasted or given away. just because I found out they were not tea for you. So your goal is not to create the ultimate retirement portfolio Pu'erh when you are 28 years old or whatever. You can take your time doing these things. So please do take your time in creating that and work to just kind of get different experiences. I think in general, a lot of people don't spend enough on samples and they spend too much on the full cakes. So, ignore that kind of romantic ideal of that while you're just getting started and focus on getting the right experiences under you. Okay, so that just about concludes this In-Betweenisode. Thank you all for tuning in. Let me know what you think of it, and I will see you all next time. Cheers.